King Charles III coronation. King Charles and royal family watch fly past Buckingham Palace, royals. Police barriers lined the roads, flags fluttered from lamp posts, and workers moved quickly, making final checks. People from different countries had arrived days earlier, camping near key streets just to be close to history. Some wrapped themselves in blankets, others held small flags, and many clutched cameras and phones, ready to capture a moment they believed would never come again in their lifetime. Inside the palace, King Charles III rose early. The morning light filtered through tall windows, soft and calm, yet his thoughts were heavy. This was not a sudden change in his life. He had waited decades for this day. As a young man, he had been trained for duty, taught the rules, the customs, and the quiet strength required of a future king. Yet nothing could fully prepare someone for the moment when responsibility truly arrives. He was no longer waiting. Today, the crown was real, and so were the expectations. Palace staff moved carefully through the corridors, speaking in low voices. Every detail mattered. Clothing was laid out with precision. Papers were reviewed again and again. Outside, the sound of helicopters and distant crowd noise slowly grew louder. The city was waking fully now. Television crews set up their equipment, commentators rehearsed their lines, and producers checked schedules down to the second. Across the world, millions were already watching or preparing to watch, drawn by tradition, curiosity, or simple respect for history. King Charles paused for a moment alone. He looked out toward the gardens, still quiet before the crowds would return later in the day. His thoughts drifted to his mother, Queen Elizabeth II. Her presence felt close, even in her absence. She had carried the crown with calm strength for decades, through times of change and challenge. Now he stood where she once stood, aware that comparisons were natural but understanding that his reign would be his own. He felt pride, yes, but also humility. Elsewhere in the palace, members of the royal family prepared in their own ways. Some were calm, others emotional. There were quiet conversations, reassuring smiles, and shared memories. For them, this day was both public and deeply personal. They were not just stepping into a ceremony, but into a moment that would be remembered long after they were gone. Outside, the crowd continued to grow. Children sat on their parents' shoulders, elderly people leaned on walking sticks, and strangers shared food and stories, united by the same purpose. As the morning progressed, the air seemed to tighten with anticipation. Church bells rang across the city, echoing through streets and over rooftops. The sound reminded everyone that this was not just a modern event, but one rooted in centuries of tradition. Carriages, vehicles, and security teams were now in place. Roads were closed, and the movement of the city slowed, almost respectfully, as if London itself had paused to watch. When King Charles finally stepped into his ceremonial attire, the weight of the moment became even clearer. The clothing was not just fabric, it carried symbols, history, and meaning. Each piece had been designed to reflect continuity, service, and duty. As he stood, supported by those around him, he took a steady breath. He knew the eyes of the world would soon be upon him, but at that moment he focused on something simpler, the promise to serve. Outside, cheers began to ripple through the crowd as signals spread that the royal procession was nearing. People stood taller, waved flags higher, and held their breath. Some had tears in their eyes, others smiled widely. Not everyone shared the same feelings about the monarchy, but no one could deny the importance of the day. It was history unfolding in real time. The journey toward the ceremony began, and London watched closely. Buildings that had stood for hundreds of years reflected the movement below, as if observing another chapter in their long existence. The sound of horses, hooves, engines, and distant applause blended into a single rhythm. From balconies, windows, and streets, people leaned forward, trying to catch even a brief glimpse of the new king. Inside the procession, King Charles remained composed. He acknowledged the crowds with measured gestures, understanding that this was not about personal pride but shared national experience. Each face in the crowd represented a story, a hope, or a question about what his reign would bring. He did not know them, yet he felt connected to them in that moment. As the procession moved onward, the palace behind him seemed both familiar and distant. It was no longer just a residence or a workplace. It was a symbol, and today it would once again become the center of the nation's attention. The royal family followed, united by duty, tradition, and the understanding that their lives were forever tied to moments like this. The sky above London remained clear, as if offering its own approval. Flags continued to wave, cheers continued to rise, and the city held its breath. This was only the beginning of the day, yet already it carried the emotional weight of years past and years yet to come. King Charles knew that after the celebrations ended, the real work would begin. For now, though, the morning belonged to history. Every step, every sound, every glance would be remembered. And as the procession moved forward, one truth became clear to all who watched. This was not just the start of a ceremony, but the start of a new chapter for a king, a family, and a nation. The ceremony unfolded with careful timing, each moment following a path shaped by centuries of tradition. Inside the grand hall, the atmosphere was quiet but powerful. Every sound carried meaning, from soft footsteps to the distant echo of voices. King Charles stood at the center of it all, calm on the outside, yet deeply aware of the importance of what was happening. This was not just a public event. It was the moment when duty fully passed into his hands. As the ceremony progressed, eyes from around the world remained fixed on him. Cameras captured every movement, every expression. People watching from homes, public spaces, and distant countries felt the seriousness of the occasion. Some remembered past ceremonies. Others were seeing such a moment for the first time. Despite different opinions and emotions, most understood that this was a turning point in history. King Charles listened carefully as words were spoken that carried great weight. These were not just formal phrases. They were promises made in front of a nation and the world. Promises to serve, to protect tradition while understanding change, and to place responsibility above personal desire. As he responded, his voice was steady, reflecting years of preparation and patience. In his mind, memories moved quietly. He thought about his long life of waiting, the years spent supporting his mother, learning from her example, and standing in the background while she led. There were moments of pride, moments of doubt, and moments when the future felt very far away. Now that future had arrived, and it felt both familiar and new. Members of the royal family watched closely. For them, this was a mix of pride and reflection. They remembered Queen Elizabeth II, her strength and her long service. Her absence was deeply felt, yet her influence was everywhere. It lived in the rituals, the symbols, and the calm confidence with which King Charles carried himself. Her legacy was not something to escape, but something to honor. Outside the hall, crowds waited patiently, listening through broadcasts and large screens. Some stood for hours without complaint. They shared food, stories, and quiet conversations. Strangers became companions for the day, united by a shared experience. For many, this was more than watching a ceremony. It was about being part of a moment that connected generations. As the central moments of the ceremony continued, King Charles felt the emotional weight grow stronger. The crown, the symbols, and the music all served as reminders that leadership was not about privilege alone. It was about service, endurance, and understanding the people you represent. He knew the world had changed greatly since the last coronation, and expectations were different now. The challenge ahead was to respect tradition while speaking to a modern society. When the most important moment arrived, the room seemed to hold its breath. Time felt slower, as if history itself was pausing to watch. As the crown was placed, the meaning of the day reached its highest point. King Charles was no longer just preparing to be king. He was king. The responsibility was complete and there was no turning back. A wave of sound followed, from music to applause, spreading beyond the walls of the building. Bells rang across the city, their echoes rolling through streets and over rooftops. London responded as it always had to moments like this, with a mix of respect, celebration, and quiet reflection. The sound traveled far, reaching people who could not be there but still felt connected. Inside, King Charles remained composed. He understood that while this moment was about him, it was also about the nation and the future. He looked briefly toward his family, drawing strength from their presence. Their expressions showed support, pride, and understanding. They knew that while celebrations would follow, the real work was only beginning. As the ceremony moved toward its conclusion, the mood slowly shifted. The intense focus softened into something warmer. There was a sense of shared accomplishment, as if everyone present had played a small part in carrying tradition forward. For King Charles, this was a moment of quiet resolve. He was aware that leadership would bring challenges, criticism, and difficult decisions. Yet he also believed in the value of steady service. Outside, cheers grew louder as news spread that the ceremony was complete. People hugged, waved flags, and took photos. Some felt emotional without fully understanding why. Others spoke about the past, remembering earlier monarchs and moments they had witnessed in their lives. The day had become a bridge between memory and hope. As King Charles prepared to leave the hall, he took one last moment to center himself. The crown and robes carried weight, both physical and symbolic. But beneath them, he was still the same person shaped by years of experience, belief, and duty. He knew he could not be perfect, but he could be committed. The transition from ceremony to public appearance was smooth and carefully planned. Security teams moved into place, and the next stage of the day began to take form. The journey back toward Buckingham Palace awaited, where the people would finally see their king standing among his family. As he moved forward, one truth became clear. This was not the end of a story, but the middle of one. The coronation marked the official beginning, but the meaning of his reign would be written day by day, through action rather than ceremony. And as the world watched, King Charles stepped into that future with quiet determination, carrying the weight of history and the promise of service together. After the ceremony ended, the mood across London slowly changed from quiet respect to open celebration. The formal moments were complete, but the day was far from over. The journey back to Buckingham Palace began, and with it came a new wave of excitement. Crowds that had waited for hours now stood taller, knowing they were about to see the royal family together in a moment that would be shared around the world. The streets along the route were packed. People waved flags, called out greetings, and held up their phones to capture even a second of the passing procession. Some had tears in their eyes, others laughed and cheered, and many simply stood in silence, taking it all in. For them, this was not just about seeing royalty. It was about being present at a moment that would become part of history books and family stories. Inside the vehicle, King Charles sat calmly, looking out at the faces lining the streets. Each face told a different story. There were young children experiencing this for the first time, older people remembering past events, and visitors from other countries drawn by tradition and curiosity. He understood that not everyone felt the same way about the monarchy, but he respected the fact that they had gathered together peacefully to witness change. The closer they came to Buckingham Palace, the louder the crowd became. The palace gates, familiar to many through pictures and broadcasts, now stood as the focal point of the nation. Security was tight, yet the atmosphere remained warm and welcoming. The sense of unity was strong, even among strangers who had never met before that day. When the procession arrived, the royal family stepped out together. Cameras flashed from every direction and cheers filled the air. King Charles walked with steady steps, aware that every movement was being watched, yet he did not appear distant. He acknowledged the crowd with gentle gestures, understanding that this connection mattered. It was not enough to be seen, he needed to be felt as present and aware. Inside the palace, there was a brief moment of calm. Away from the noise, the family gathered, sharing quiet words and small smiles. The tension of the ceremony had passed, replaced by a feeling of shared relief. They knew that soon they would step onto the balcony, a tradition that symbolized the link between the monarchy and the people. As they prepared, King Charles took a moment to reflect. The palace had been his home for many years, yet today it felt different. It was no longer just a familiar place. It was now the center of his responsibility as king. The walls that had witnessed history for generations were now watching him begin his own chapter. Outside, the crowd grew restless with excitement. People pressed closer to the gates, scanning the balcony above. Conversations paused every few seconds as people thought they saw movement. The energy was electric, carried by the belief that something meaningful was about to happen. When the doors finally opened and the royal family stepped onto the balcony, the reaction was immediate and powerful. A wave of sound rolled through the crowd, cheers rising as flags waved in every direction. King Charles stood at the center, surrounded by family. The image was simple yet strong, showing continuity, unity, and tradition all at once. From the balcony, the view was overwhelming. The sea of people stretched far beyond what the eye could see. King Charles felt the full weight of public attention in that moment. This was not a distant ceremony viewed through screens. This was direct human connection. He raised his hand in greeting, and the crowd responded with even louder cheers. Members of the royal family stood beside him, each playing their role without words. Their presence showed support and stability. Some smiled warmly, others looked thoughtful, but all understood the importance of standing together. This moment was not about individuals. It was about showing a united front to the nation. For many in the crowd, this was the highlight of the day. Parents lifted children higher so they could see. Friends hugged and pointed toward the balcony. Strangers shared smiles, knowing they were witnessing something special together. Cameras clicked, videos recorded, and memories were formed that would last a lifetime. As the royal family remained on the balcony, the noise slowly settled into a steady rhythm of applause and cheering. King Charles took it all in, knowing that moments like this were rare. He did not take the response lightly. He understood that public trust must be earned and maintained, not assumed. Behind the scenes, palace staff watched closely, ensuring everything went smoothly. Timing was precise and every detail mattered. Yet from the outside, the moment felt natural and unforced. That balance between careful planning and genuine feeling was part of what made the scene so powerful. Eventually, the time came to step back inside. The cheers followed the royal family as they left the balcony, echoing across the palace grounds. The crowd remained, still energized, knowing that more was yet to come. The day was building toward another symbolic moment that would soon fill the sky. Inside, King Charles felt a mix of emotions. Pride, gratitude, and awareness all blended together. He knew that standing on the balcony was more than tradition. It was a promise of presence and connection. As the next stage of the celebration approached, he prepared himself once again, ready to face the people, the future, and the responsibilities that came with the crown. As the royal family settled inside after the balcony appearance, a quiet pause filled the palace. Outside, the crowd did not move away. Instead, people looked up toward the open sky, knowing another important moment was approaching. There was a feeling of shared excitement, different from the earlier cheers. This excitement came with anticipation, as if everyone was holding their breath together. King Charles stood near a large window, listening carefully. In the distance, A low sound could be heard, steady and growing stronger. It was not yet clear, but everyone recognized what it meant. The flypast was about to begin. This moment was not only about celebration. It was about recognition, unity, and respect for service that stretched across generations. When the first aircraft appeared, a ripple of sound moved through the crowd. Heads tilted upward, phones were raised, and voices lifted in awe. The sky became a stage, and the aircraft moved across it with purpose and precision. Their formation was tight, their movement smooth, and their presence powerful. It was a display that spoke without words. From inside the palace, King Charles watched closely. His expression remained calm, but his eyes showed deep reflection. This was not just a show of skill. It was a symbol of national strength and shared effort. He understood that behind each aircraft were people who trained for years, people who served quietly, often far from public attention. As more aircraft followed, the sound grew louder, filling the air above Buckingham Palace. The crowd responded with renewed energy. Cheers rose again, mixed with applause and excited voices. Children pointed to the sky, parents explained what they were seeing, and older people watched with thoughtful expressions. For many, the flypast connected memories of the past with the present moment. King Charles stood alongside members of the royal family, all of them looking upward together. There were no formal gestures now, no speeches, no required expressions. This moment allowed quiet reflection. Each person watching had their own thoughts, their own connection to what was happening above them. For the king, the flypast carried special meaning. It reminded him that leadership was supported by countless individuals who worked every day without recognition. It also reminded him that unity came not only from tradition but from shared effort and mutual respect. The sky above became a reminder that service takes many forms. Outside, the crowd remained fully engaged. Even those who had been standing for hours did not seem tired. The sound, the sight, and the shared experience held everyone's attention. People from different backgrounds stood side by side, momentarily forgetting differences. In that moment, they were simply witnesses to history. The aircraft moved in perfect timing, one formation following another. The sound rolled across the palace grounds, echoing against buildings and trees. Some people covered their ears briefly, smiling as they did. Others closed their eyes for a second, feeling the vibration pass through the ground beneath their feet. As the flypast continued, television broadcasts captured every angle. Viewers around the world watched the sky above London, feeling connected despite distance. For those unable to attend in person, the sound and movement still carried emotional weight. It was a reminder that certain moments reach far beyond physical location. Inside the palace, King Charles remained still, allowing the moment to speak for itself. He did not wave or gesture. He simply watched, understanding that leadership also meant knowing when to stand quietly and let others be seen. The flypast was not about him alone. It was about the nation and those who served it. When the final aircraft passed overhead, the sound slowly faded into the distance. The crowd remained silent for a brief second, as if unsure whether the moment was truly over. Then applause broke out, spreading quickly and loudly. Cheers followed, full of energy and emotion. King Charles took a deep breath. The flypast had ended, but its meaning lingered. He felt gratitude, not only for the display but for the unity it created. He knew that moments like this helped build connection, even if only for a short time. They reminded people of shared identity and shared responsibility. Around him, members of the royal family exchanged quiet looks and small nods. No words were needed. They had all felt the same thing. The flypast had brought a sense of closure to the formal celebrations, while also pointing toward the future. Outside, people slowly lowered their phones and looked at one another. Some laughed, others spoke excitedly about their favorite part. Many stayed in place, unwilling to leave too quickly. They understood they had witnessed something meaningful, something that would be remembered long after the day ended. As the crowd began to slowly move, the palace remained standing as it always had, calm and steady. The flag still waved, the guards remained at their posts, and the city gradually returned to motion. Yet something had shifted. A new chapter had been marked, not only through ceremony but through shared experience. Inside, King Charles prepared to move on to the next part of the day. The celebrations would soon quiet, and the reality of leadership would come into sharper focus. He knew challenges awaited, questions would arise, and expectations would remain high. But moments like the flypast reminded him that leadership was never carried alone. As the sounds faded and the sky cleared, one thing was certain: the flypast had not been just a performance. It had been a message, carried across the city and beyond, reminding everyone watching that history, service, and unity were still deeply connected. And as King Charles turned away from the window, he carried that reminder with him, ready to face what came next. As the flypast ended and the sound faded into the distance, a gentle calm slowly settled over Buckingham Palace and the surrounding streets. The loud cheers softened into steady conversations, and people began to move at an unhurried pace. The day had been full of energy, emotion, and history, but now it was reaching a quieter, more thoughtful stage. For many, this calm felt just as meaningful as the celebration itself. Inside the palace, King Charles took a moment to be alone. The rooms felt familiar, yet different. The events of the day had changed how everything felt. The walls, the windows, and the long corridors had witnessed many moments over the years, but today marked the beginning of a new chapter. He stood still, letting the silence speak. After so many sounds, cameras, and crowds, the quiet felt grounding. His thoughts turned inward. The ceremony, the balcony appearance, and the flypast had all passed smoothly, but he knew these were only symbols. The true meaning of the day lay ahead, in the choices he would make and the responsibilities he would carry. Becoming king was not the end of a journey, but the start of a different kind of work, one that required patience, balance, and steady purpose. He thought again of his mother. Her example guided him even now. She had shown the value of consistency and calm service, even during times of change. He knew the world she ruled was not the same as the one he now faced. Society had grown more connected, more questioning, and faster moving. Yet some values remained the same, such as respect, duty, and care for others. Elsewhere in the palace, members of the royal family also began to relax. Some sat together quietly, sharing simple conversations. Others checked messages from friends and family who had watched from afar. There was laughter mixed with tired smiles. The long day had taken its toll, but there was also a sense of shared achievement. They had played their roles, supported one another, and stood together when it mattered most. Outside, the crowd slowly thinned. People packed away flags, folded blankets, and took final photos near the palace gates. Many spoke about what they had seen, replaying moments in their minds. Parents explained the day to their children, hoping they would remember it years later. Visitors promised themselves they would tell this story to others, proud to say they had been there. London began to return to its usual rhythm. Streets reopened, traffic resumed, and shops welcomed customers again. Yet there was still a feeling in the air that something important had happened. Even those who had not followed the events closely could sense it. History had moved forward and the city had witnessed it together. As evening approached, the light over the palace changed. The golden glow of late afternoon gave way to softer tones. King Charles looked out once more, not as part of a public moment, but as a private reflection. He understood that leadership often meant standing between tradition and progress, listening carefully, and acting thoughtfully. Messages of support and congratulations continued to arrive from around the world. Leaders, organizations, and individuals shared their hopes for the future. King Charles read some of them, aware that expectations were high. He did not see this as pressure alone, but as trust. Trust that he would serve with care and sincerity. Later, as the palace settled for the night, the sounds grew fewer. Staff moved quietly, completing their final duties. The excitement of the day slowly transformed into memory. Yet for King Charles, sleep did not come easily. His mind remained active, considering the work ahead. The crown represented continuity, but also responsibility to adapt and understand. He knew that not everyone viewed the monarchy in the same way. Some questioned its role, others held deep respect for it. He accepted this reality. Leadership, he believed, was about listening even when opinions differed. His goal was not to be distant, but to remain thoughtful and aware of the people he served. The day had shown him the power of shared moments. From the ceremony to the flypast, people had come together, even if only briefly. That unity mattered. It reminded him that symbols could still bring people closer when used with honesty and respect. As night fell over London, lights reflected softly against palace windows. The crowds were gone now, but their presence lingered in memory. King Charles understood that tomorrow would bring meetings, briefings, and decisions. The role of king would quickly become less ceremonial and more practical. Before retiring for the night, he paused once more. He did not see himself as perfect or all-knowing. Instead, he saw himself as a servant of the nation, guided by experience and shaped by history. The path ahead would not always be easy, but it would be faced with care. The coronation day had ended, but its meaning would continue to unfold. It marked a turning point, not just for one man, but for an institution and a country moving forward together. As the palace grew quiet, one truth remained clear. The crown was now his, but its purpose belonged to the people. And so, under the calm night sky, a new reign truly began. Not with loud music or grand displays, but with quiet determination, reflection, and a promise to serve with steady heart and open mind.